Gnoggin, coming to you live and in the flesh. I'm going to tell you about my experience with custom consoles. See, I went into an electronics class, and for the final of this class, it was open-ended. We could do anything. Got an A, by the way. I decided I would customize a Super Nintendo. By I mean me and a partner friend. So here it is, in all of its mediocre glory. Ignore the USB ports being red, they were the only color available. And the paint job is okay at best. But it had to be painted, you know? So bad out-of-place composite RCA cables, but added an HDMI port and an Ethernet port. Why would a SNES need an internet connection? I'll get to that in a moment. All these things, you may have noticed that it's not a Super Nintendo anymore. That's a USB port, not a cartridge port. Well, that's because I made custom cartridges also. That happened to also be USBs. Each of these cartridges holds the entire library of games for the Super Nintendo and the Game Boy Advance. Well, the Game Boy Advance one doesn't hold the entire library. It holds most of the library for the Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance, but not all of it. The Super Nintendo one, however, does contain every single North American released Super Nintendo game. So this is essentially an emulator, and the cartridges contain all the ROMs. I also have one for the NES, and one for the Sega Genesis. You have no idea how fun it is to plug a Sega Genesis game into a Super Nintendo. Let's talk more about the console. This doesn't do anything anymore. It used to be the reset button. This is still the power on and off switch. Now, you might have noticed this and you might have recognized it. It's actually a Raspberry Pi system inside of here. It's been wired and programmed to work as an emulator. We couldn't quite figure out how to get the power thing to work how we wanted, so it's still a USB port, and it comes out of the side. The USB ports are so that you can use almost any USB controller. Even different ones, like Player 1 could use this for a classic feel, and Player 2 could use this for a more modern feel. But sadly, 360 and PS3 controllers don't work. Now with the camera pointed at the telly, here's what it looks like when it's booting. This is the Sega Genesis cartridge. So why does it need an Ethernet port? Well, because that's how you get the ROMs. You can't plug in the cartridges into a computer and just transfer files over. You have to use SCP going through Ethernet ports. So here's the menu with the vast majority of Sega Genesis games. Note, I'm playing with a Super Nintendo controller. And let's play Sonic 3, because I love that game. And as you can see, there's no frame rate issues. The only problem I've really had was with Donkey Kong Country, and that was just that the audio was off key. So the way I did this with the cartridges and everything is unnecessary. I only did it as a little extra fun thing for the class for a better grade. You don't even need to use an old Super Nintendo. At cheapest, this whole system could cost you probably $50. $50 for every classic game from the Nintendo 64 back, emulated. So do that legally. I'll put a link in the description of the guide that I followed. I didn't follow it exactly though, because of the whole cartridge thing. But yeah, $35 Raspberry Pi, $15, $20 fast, large-sized SD card, and a USB controller / USB keyboard is all you need.